The Maze Runner is based off of the book that tells the story of these group of boys who get taken away, they get their memories erased, and then get thrown into the middle of nowhere that's surrounded by a maze, which they can't get out, since I guess these guys never had a highlight subscription. And the best way to describe this movie is the way that the director pitched it, where he said it was a mixture of Lord of the Flies with a little bit of Lost. And then when you really look at the movie, it's a little bit of Labyrinth, and then the director's short film, and then also pretty much every other book adaptation that's out there. Now, that's not to say that the movie doesn't stand on its own. It definitely does have its similarities, but just covering the movie to see what it has, I actually found it to have some interesting points in the movie. I mean, I like the whole premise that they had. Not so much the maze, but just the fact that you're able to see this story through the perspective of a dude, and the fact that the whole romance aspect isn't necessarily there, so you don't have to worry about the story just focusing on two people. You actually get to see all of the other characters, and you actually get to focus on the whole maze and aspect of the things that are going on, because you don't have to worry about the lovey-dovey part. For example, Dylan O'Brien, who you may know him from Teen Wolf, and he's doing his thing, bringing the ladies in. You also have Will Poulter, who many may know him from Narnia, but I know him as a kid, who ended up getting bit by a spider when he was hanging out with a fake family. But then there's also Ferb, who you definitely know what he's doing today, and that is nothing since he's stuck in a maze. But there's also the visual aspect of the film, who the director himself said that he wanted to sort of mimic Terrence Malick, which is always a really good thing since he makes really good looking pictures. You just want to make sure that you add some substance in there. And I think for the most part, he does do a good job at having a really beautiful looking movie. There are some scenes that do definitely look fake, but then other ones that actually do work out. Some of the action scenes were actually pretty cool, the way that they're building up suspense, but then at the same time, there are other moments where it's like, you see it in the commercial where he's trying to break through, but before he does that, like, the thing is closing in and you're like, okay, I know he's going to run through. You're getting to the point where it's impossible. Oh, I guess, okay, I guess he did it. But then you also have the whole aspect of the maze moving around, which I thought was really cool, but at the same time, you see that the maze is full of all of these shrubs, which doesn't necessarily make sense, because if this thing is moving around, it's going to be destroying them all. But then the movie also has this other aspect of these things called grievers, which are practically the Cloverfield monster mixed in with that metallic spider thing from the Wild Wild West, and those were also pretty interesting. But really, if you're a fan of the book, I think it does do a good job at adapting it into a film, and at the same time, if you didn't read the book or you didn't really seem to care for the movie, I think if you do end up watching it, you'll end up having a really good time and end up enjoying it, especially since these movies are going to continue, because I'm pretty sure that the book series is a trilogy with a prequel as well, so I feel like this is going to end up being sort of like the guy version perspective of the Hunger Games, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because both of these series aren't necessarily Oscar contenders, but at the same time, they do have some substance in it, enough substance at least, to at least be enjoyable as they come out once a year. That being said, this movie definitely leaves you hanging at the end, and where it sort of has a mixture of Divergent and Catching Fire ending, and where it sort of left me confused a little bit, so I actually went back and read the Maze Runner's Wikipedia summary page to actually figure out what the heck was going on. And first, I want to get a little bit into the spoilers, so thou has been warned if you haven't seen the movie. Now, for starters, just tackling the whole idea of it seeming like every other book adaptation, it's going to be out there. I mean, the same way that superhero movies seem very similar, action movies, romance movies, there are definitely many aspects of the movies that seem to be very much alike. Whether you think that it's the best movie and it's better than the other ones, there are definitely things that are very similar. For example, you have the whole idea of always having it be a dystopian universe for whatever reason. I mean, the Hunger Games, you have to put these kids to fight each other. In Divergent and The Giver, they're given these specific tasks with also having a specific role that you know is going to cause an uprising. And in this one, you learn that they had this whole sunflower incident that happened that caused the world to completely, like, I don't know, start decaying or something, and they felt that the best way to train these kids, I guess, was to create this facility that was probably less than the U.S. deficit, but at the same time probably cost $1 gazillion, and it's just like, there's no boot camp or anything else that you could have taken these kids to. And what these movies always make me think is that if something were to happen, like really big, like that happens in these movies to the Earth that we're in right now, are we actually thinking that these things are actual viable options to then go to? There's also the trend in these films of always having to have a great actor make an appearance for like a minimum of 10 minutes just to say, yeah, look, there's some credit in this movie. There's also the adorable, cute kid who you see in the movie who you don't want to get attached because they always die. And then, of course, there's always the aspect of being the chosen one in Hunger Games. She's the one who's doing the revolution in Divergent. She's Divergent in The Giver. He's the giver, and in this one, he's obviously the one who's going to stop the Maze Runner and everything. And it's not bad to have it from the perspective of the guy who's supposed to be the chosen one. I mean, obviously, if you have it from the perspective of this dude, it's not going to be as interesting. Maybe it'd be a little bit interesting. But at the same time, it's just how cheesy they make it from the whole aspect of, in the beginning of this movie, saying, you know what, man? You're different. Besides that, there are various other things that happen in the movie that are just to like make things more intense when they don't necessarily need to be more intense, and a bunch of other things that just happen here and there, but one of them being that Will Poulter's character at a specific scene in the movie, when the main guy actually kills one of the grievers, he makes a big deal and he's like, you know what, you have destroyed our truce, now everything's gonna be completely horrible, there is no peace, and it's like, kid, they were eating you regardless. Where was the peace? There are also some conveniences that happen in the movie. For example, there's the whole female character who comes out of nowhere and for whatever reason doesn't feel that there are actual medicine things in her pocket. I mean, I know yoga pants must be completely banned in dystopian futures, but at the same time, how do you not realize that those valves are completely there? And then they're so convenient, not only for the first guy who actually got hurt, but they knew that later on the main character was going to sting himself, and then she was going to be there when he wakes up going, ta-da! Also, did anybody else think that it was pretty dumb for this kid to just leave a random map that he said it was supposed to be really secret in a place where the kids knew where that thing was out in the middle of the woods, but then thinking that just because he had it covered with a blanket, everything was going to be okay. The same way that I guess that the bamboo doors that they had, which where in the world did they get bamboo from either? But at the same time, they were just locked from the outside with like a piece of string, which you can put your hand in there and then just escape. But then back to this kid, did anybody wonder where he got his gel, or really where any of these guys were able to shave or cut their hair or anything else, considering that they're all going through puberty, so they should be facing things like this. Which also brings us to the other element that if these movies try to go the serious route, there's also a complete other aspect. I mean, I know it's family friendly and they're not trying to do anything else, but I mean, when you look at other things like Y: The Last Man or Oz or Orange Is the New Black, when you have these scenarios when it's just a specific group of people, and especially when they're going through that stage of puberty, something tends to happen there. And again, I know that the movie was trying to be more family friendly, if anything, but at the same time, if you were actually trying to focus on the psychology of what would happen in these situations, there would be some underlying subtext that would be happening with some of these characters. On a lighter note, did anybody else notice that some of these guys looked way too old to be in some of these scenes? Especially when you have this dude right here, who looks like he's still paying off his mortgage, which is probably why he's so happy to be here, because he doesn't have to deal with it. Other than that, the ending definitely leaves you with enough questions to then come back for the sequel, with a pretty decent cast that's still going to be coming back in the sequel as well. But did anybody else feel that Tammy One from Parks and Rec didn't really have to pretend to fake her death? I thought that it was completely over the top. But those of you who actually read more than the Wikipedia summary page probably know what happened and the reasoning for it, and especially what's going to happen in the next coming books / movies. So I'm curious your thoughts. Definitely let me know your thoughts down below. If you read the book or if you just went into this movie fresh, let me know what you thought about the movie, whether you liked it or not, or if you thought it was a good adaptation. Any other things dealing with this movie, we can definitely talk about it in the comments. And until next time, I will see you guys later.